Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking Olympics and USA versus Mexico and Italian food and varsity blues and the NCAA tournament and Beckham and Dest and Pulisic and the Champions League and American soccer media and World Cup qualifying and speed and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, hold on a second. We have a guest right from the top of the show, the great Stuart Holden. You know him, you love him. Well, at least you know him. He is joining us yet again on the State of the Union. Stu, my friend, how are you?
I snuck in for the A block. You know, I heard in television that the A block is like the big one, that you got to capture the audience's attention. Last time you guys didn't let me in for a little while, so I'm happy to be here from the first minute. I'm getting a start tonight.
Oh my goodness, this is good stuff. You're gonna have to up your game here, or we're gonna have to up our game here, Mosse, with Stuart Holden on the show here. Mosse, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. I mean, same guest twice in 4 weeks. Is this amateur hour?
It's we got to go. We're back to the well. It's a very
but very excited to have Stu on it, and both of you rocking your USA gear, and so you convinced me to throw on this Brazil jersey, which actually you gave me as a gift very generously a few weeks back. So yeah, we're all representing our country.
Maybe we can throw it to a vote out there for the listeners of whose Olympic jacket is better. I think I know, just because Alexis has aged over time, that he's probably going to win here. This is 2008 versus what, 1964?
Oh, that's not nice. So I am sporting the 1992 official jacket of the team. You may remember it from an athlete by the name of Michael Jordan sporting it. So much so that if you see it was actually a big talking point, because if you look over here where it says Reebok, which was the official sponsor of the Olympics, if you remember, Michael Jordan, obviously a Nike athlete, would drape the American flag over this side to cover up the Reebok as the wars continued on. There was a big brouhaha about if he was going to be able or want to go out in anything other than Nike. He went out, and his only concession was, I get to put the American flag over the Reebok.
So I could completely derail this podcast and say that 2008 was LeBron James, and then we could go LeBron versus Jordan, and we just lose everything for the rest of
it. Would be for the next hour. But speaking of basketball, though, NCAA tournament in full swing. My Rutgers Scarlet Knights made it for the first time since 1991. Went through in their first round, and then in true Rutgers, New Jersey fashion, decided to bow out in less than glory. Ultimately, so they're out of the tournament. But is your Michigan team still in it?
Wait, hold on, Lex. You're a very nice guy here, letting me off the hook there. You smashed my Clemson Tigers out, and you missed an opportunity to drive the knife in. So never mind, Mosse, talk Michigan, please.
No, Lex, you might recall I was very pessimistic due to the injury to our star player Isaiah Livers entering the tournament. I said we'd be lucky to get to the Sweet 16, but we are in fact in the Sweet 16. Had a nice win over LSU yesterday. I didn't get to watch it because I was covering the Olympic qualifying tournament, but I was following the score. I had buddies texting me throughout. So yeah, very happy to see that. So we are still alive.
And you have a former Wolverine legend and a basketball legend at the helm right now, right? I can't remember his name. What was his name?
Juwan Howard. He was a member of the Fab Five. In fact, I read somewhere that he's the first person ever to both play for and coach a number one seed in the NCAA tournament, which is an incredible stat. So yeah, Juwan Howard doing great things.
I mean, look, the tournament is a big thing in general, but I feel like, in a strange way, there was more attention on it, maybe because of the pandemic and everybody's kind of focused on things. But so you don't think your team's winning it, do they? Is this guy with the ankle, is he back, or is they're just doing it without him? You got that really small guy in your team too, at least like a really small, pugnacious type of
and he plays point guard, Alexi. That's the guy that brings the ball up the court, and
he's actually a transfer from Columbia, Ivy League guy who has slotted in very nicely in the Big Ten and had a terrific season. Actually had a rough game yesterday from what I read, but we won regardless.
Right. Okay.
But to answer your previous question, Isaiah Livers unlikely to come back at any point in this tournament, and so I continue to say that probably ends our national championship hopes. I don't think we could win it without him.
It's okay. Well, at least you're still in the tournament, unlike Stu's team and my team for that matter. Okay, what have you watched, Mosse? Anything interesting over the last week?
Not much, because I've been buried in this Olympic qualifying tournament. But
you're gonna be okay. You're all right. You're all right. Don't be whining. All right, out there. You have a wonderful job. We love what you do. We appreciate what you do. Don't be whining. Did you have to have watched something though to take your mind off all the soccer?
I was able to watch a few more episodes of this Money Heist, this Netflix show, the Spanish one about the bank robbery in Madrid. So
is it done? Are the episodes done? Are you getting to the end, or is there more?
No, they've done 4 seasons of it, and I believe there is a 5th season on the way. So it's that cardinal sin. I binged something that wasn't completely finished yet.
Stu, are you watching anything or anything on your
I feel like I'm going to get roasted for this, but I was convinced by friends, and I have been getting poked for friends for years, to watch The Office, and I needed to start with the British Office. And so I binged Ricky Gervais and the British Office in about 2 days. Phenomenal, right up my alley, having been born in the UK and moving here. I thought it was excellent. And my wife at the end with a hot tag said that the American Office is infinitely better than the British Office. And we started the American Office last night, and I'm 2 episodes in. I'm interested though, because the American Office went for 9 seasons and the British was only 2, that the character development was so strong that is why she feels so nationalistic towards the American version. But I thought the British version was excellent.
Yeah, I have seen both. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you. I know I'm way behind. Curb Your Enthusiasm's next.
Yeah, you should really check out a show called Friends too. I've seen both. It's hard. Which one's better? I don't know.
I'm waiting for an Alexi hot take here. I thought you were going to be outraged that at one of these.
No, I mean, no. I'm here for The Office. I think it's a really good show, and I think both of them are really good in very different ways. It's one of those rare things where it was so popular, so good, and that they took it and made it, to some people, maybe to your wife, better, but certainly they lived up to the original. And I still say the original, but it's a lot more understated, the original. It's not as in your face, but it's still really good.
It's excellent. I was like cringing in my seat at many of the jokes that are just so.
What is the moment when you finally click on it? Is it just you've just come to the end of and you're scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to stuff to watch, and you did?
No, it's just one of those. It was like I knew when I was investing in The Office, I had to sit down and it was going to be 9 seasons worth. Like I wasn't just going to fly in and do an episode or 2. Like I had to commit, and I wasn't quite ready to commit to that length until I'd finished my other shows. I felt like I was cheating on them. So now I'm open to dating, and I'm all in on The Office, and it's going well so far. We're pretty steady.
You binged 9 seasons?
No, I did the 2 British ones, and I'm just starting the American, so you might not talk to me for a while.
Yeah, that's all right. Mosse, have you watched either of these shows? Either versions of it?
I have not watched the British Office. I watched the American one. I do want to ask Stu, have you watched Seinfeld?
I have seen Seinfeld episodes. I've never watched it start to finish. Again, that's another one that I'm behind on.
Because Seinfeld versus Curb is very much a Jordan LeBron-like debate that I have with my friends all the time. So I'd be curious to get your take on it if you.
Okay, so that's my lineup. I'm set for the next year. Hopefully we don't have another pandemic, but I'm going to have American Office, Curb, and then straight into Seinfeld.
I think Curb is much better than Seinfeld. I'm on that side. Okay. Let's see here. Are we done talking about shows? Should we light this candle? Everybody ready?
Crank it up.
Thank you, Stu, by the way, for joining us from the start. That's very cool. If you're just tuning in, Stuart Holden is with us today. Legendary player and legendary voice when it comes to the world of soccer over there. So he's going to dazzle us with all sorts of interesting and entertaining takes as we go through this today. All right, let's go. We're going to start out as we always do, or as we have done in the pandemic, of jumping right in. And the Olympic tournament rolls on. The U.S. Doing what we expect of a U.S. team in a CONCACAF type of situation, in that they have won their first 2 games of this group stage, which puts them automatically, they've already qualified for that all-important game, that semifinal game that will decide if they win. We'll give them the opportunity to go to the Olympics this summer. Has it been a seminal type of moment where there's oohs and ahs? No, but we beat the likes of Costa Rica and Dominican Republic. And Jason Kreis and his team did what we expect. But that leaves us now with the third game of the group, which is against our good friends Mexico coming up in a strange type of moment here where it's U.S.-Mexico, and it doesn't matter whether it's U.S.-Mexico on the soccer field or on the on a table playing cards or parcheesi or dice or anything else. There's a rivalry, and it is elevated to another level. However, the most important game, as I just mentioned, is the semifinal game, and both of these teams are through. So this is for first place in the group that could determine who you ultimately, well, it's going to determine who you ultimately play in that semifinal. So the U.S. is faced with this big rivalry game where they don't want to put all of their eggs into this basket right now because they have a much bigger situation coming up in that semifinal game that they've already qualified for. Stu, you worked this past week, and you worked both of these U.S. games. Were you impressed by this team? Because we haven't seen this team. And were you underwhelmed by this team, especially in the context of what we're talking about almost daily right now, how great the U.S. men are and all this talent that we have out there? Were you underwhelmed by what you saw from Jason Kreis's under 23, actually under 24 Olympic team right now down in Guadalajara at this CONCACAF tournament?
I would say I've been generally underwhelmed by this team. And I think the scoreline against Dominican Republic flattered to deceive. I think 4-0 and playing a good half of a half. I'm not willing to say, wow, this team's been incredible. I would say a grade as a 6 out of 10. And I'm grading on a curve a little bit because I do think we have to be fair to these players and the coaches, and that it's no small ask saying, okay, you haven't played a game in 4 months, throw together a team that's trained for 2 weeks. A number of these players hadn't really been in the pool, but had good years last year. And now they're a part of the group, and then trying to piece all of that together and expect in the first minute it's going to be good. And it wasn't good against Costa Rica. They struggled for large parts, but they found a way. And then they found a way against the Dominican Republic, and Jason Kreis recognized in the first half, not nearly good enough. According to Georgi Mihailovic, he gave him a spank on the butt, and apparently that really woke him up. In the second half, he made the right changes. They got the win, and you're looking pretty. And so you're 6 points going into a game against Mexico. And I agree with you, Alexi. It's a really fascinating game because in one hand, it's Mexico. We all know what Mexico means. Anybody that listens to this pod and that has followed U.S. soccer knows how big of a game this is. We don't need you to tell you, us to tell you that. Jason Kreis has said it. Jaime Lozano has said it, and they're all saying the right things. Of course they are. You don't want to say to your team, hey, guys, look past. It's about the semifinal. But in saying that, I do think both coaches will make changes and be a little bit more cautious with their lineup. You're not going to see A lineups in this game. It's all about the semifinal. In the U.S., the last 2 cycles, they won and they waltzed through the group stage. It was full of confidence into the semifinal, and then no Olympics based on that one game. And I don't think you'll see the team make that same mistake. And then who do you play in Group B? I mean, Mosse, I'm curious who you think who's the standout team there. Nobody seems to want to run away with that group. You thought it was going to be Honduras and Canada, and then all of a sudden El Salvador get a late equalizer against Honduras the other night. And I don't see a team that, by the way, if the U.S. lost to, I'd say, well, that was a better team. No, the U.S. should be qualifying for this World Cup. No ifs, ands, or buts. World Cup. I said Olympics. Sorry.
No, I still suspect it'll be either Canada or Honduras. If it's Canada, you had fond memories of a semifinal in this tournament against Canada back in 2008, 3-0. Freddie Adu with 2 goals. I know you and Mo Adu both played in that one. If it's Honduras, though, the last edition of this tournament, Honduras beat the U.S. in the semis 2-0. Albert Elise with a big game in that one. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, in terms of the U.S. team, I know Jason Kreis has sort of bristled at the notion that there are starters and backups. But to me, there's no world in which he wouldn't have put out what he thought was his strongest team for the Costa Rica game. And there's no world in which he's not going to put out his strongest team for the semifinal. So I view the Dominican Republic and the Mexico games through the lens of, can anybody who didn't start the Costa Rica game do enough in those 2 matches to get themselves in the starting lineup for the semifinal? So where do you think we stand right now as far as that goes?
Wow. As I said before, Jason Kreis's job is not to beat Mexico. Jason Kreis's job is to qualify this team for the Olympics, something that has not been done since 2008. Anything that happens against Mexico, be it is formation, be it the result, be it the decisions that he makes relative to players with red cards, with yellow cards, Justin Glad and Jesus Ferreira, for example, or players that need rest, has to be done with an eye to giving him the best chance of accomplishing that goal, which is qualifying this team right now. I do think that he knows what his best 11 is, and I do think that he is going to make those changes. And in essence, it's a bad word, but sacrifice something against Mexico in order to be better against whoever it ends up being in that semifinal. You don't want to, win the battle and lose the war when it comes to something like this. And so Jason Kreis has to figure out what that ultimately is. And he's probably thinking about that right now. Yeah,
Alexi, I think he had an idea of what his best 11 was. And I don't think, and Mosse, to your point, I think that was rolled out in game one, but I would say his messaging, and then also having been part of Gold Cups, Olympic qualifiers, et cetera, there's opportunities genuinely for guys to play themselves into those positions. And I think you phrase it nicely, saying the game against Dominican and the game against Mexico, while it might not be, Ferreira and Glad because they are on yellow cards, I think those two are locks for that semifinal. But by the way, if Soto starts and he scores a hat trick, he could get the shout, And so I think Jason Kreis in an ideal world said, okay, game one is here. Game two, this is my lineup. Game three, we'll see where guys lie. And then we've got our lineup. But I genuinely think there's a couple positions, especially in the middle of the park and in the wide areas, that he's not entirely sure who his best group is and who his most informed players are going to be for those games. And that's where his decisions genuinely do come. And guess what? Like Alexi said, like you said, you live and die by that all-important semifinal. I don't care if the U.S. beat Mexico and lose the semifinal. I won't care about the Mexico game. I'll care about the semifinal.
But to your point, Stu, they should qualify. In now seeing the other group, and by the way, the soccer gods did us a favor by having Mexico in our group, because that would have been a problem. Mexico is the best team in this tournament. I'm comfortable saying that. And then it's the U.S. And so the fact that they don't have to face each other in that all important semifinal game, that's a good thing. But I haven't seen a single team over there in Group B that the U.S. would lose to. Now, they can conspire to do anything, so they certainly could lose to it, but the talent that they have should send them through. And by the way, we were talking about this. What? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, let me see where you land on this, because going into this tournament, doing some of the prep, I was listening to some of, different takes around the world of American soccer. And, and I was hearing quite commonly that, well, if the U.S. don't qualify for the Olympics, it's not an indictment on the program and where this team is headed. And because we have our B team, our A guys aren't involved. And, if we don't qualify, so what? We'll move on and people will get over it. Where do you sit here? Because I have a pretty strong opinion here.
No, I think it would be a failure. I think it would be a failure for the leadership in charge. So we're talking about Ernie Stewart. We're talking about Brian McBride. We're talking about Greg Berhalter. And we're talking about Jason Kreis. I think it would be a failure to not do it, given the amount of talent that we have. We haven't been able to do it since 2008. And I think it's just too easy to sweep it under the carpet and say, oh, it's okay. In the same way that I don't want people to look past the 22 World Cup and just look to 2026. No, this is what is at stake here. This is an international tournament. There is prestige associated. Hey, if Mexico is our biggest rival, then just look to Mexico and how they view the Olympics and how they have used the Olympics. Look back in 2012 and what they did. So I recognize what will happen if they don't qualify. They'll say, oh, we got all these players and stuff like that. But I think that's a cop-out. And I think that it should be viewed as a failure, not the likes of which we've seen in 2017, not qualifying for 2018, but absolutely it is a failure given the talent that they have. And now, having seen these players play and these teams play, they should be one of the top two teams coming out of this.
Yes. And I think it speaks to how the U.S. pool has grown as well. And you're looking at the teams and you're evaluating the talent in the other teams. And you're saying, okay, well, our B team actually should beat Honduras, should beat Canada, should beat El Salvador. And so I say to that, don't let anybody tell you this tournament doesn't matter. You and I have both played in the Olympics, Alexi, and it is as much about going to an international tournament, experiencing that, playing against the best under 23 players available globally. It's about strengthening this pool, not just for the U23, but the senior team level. Look, these guys realistically should be then competing to be a part of that A group, right? You're not going to have Pulisic, Adams, McKennie, Reyna, potentially, right? Some of those guys might, but for the most part, you're not going to get the top 1% of the American pool. But as you look forward to 2022, you need these guys having been a part of that, playing on the international stage, playing in front of scouts, potentially getting moves to Europe, potentially finding better club fits. And I just think it is incredibly important for U.S. soccer, the men's team, for the momentum of this pool, et cetera. And if we don't qualify, I'll be incredibly disappointed. And I do think it will be another indictment on this program, and it'll set back some of that really positive momentum going right now.
Mosse, you got something to say? I can see it. I can see it in your eyes, my friend.
It's burning.
To Stu's point, the Olympics this year, it's an incredible field. You have Brazil, Argentina, France, Germany, Spain. So if the U.S. qualifies, they would get some great competition there. That being said, the Gold Cup is occurring right before the start of the World Cup qualifying octagonal. And there is a school of thought that giving Greg Berhalter a month to work with the U.S.'s best players leading into World Cup qualifying would be incredibly beneficial. It does seem like the wind is blowing towards the U.S. prioritizing more the Olympics this summer if they qualify. Where do you stand on that, Stu? In a hypothetical world in which the U.S. could get whatever players they wanted released from European clubs, if the U.S. is playing in the Olympics and the Gold Cup this summer, would you give Jason Kreis the best players or Greg Berhalter?
Well, if you want to watch us live on Fox Sports all summer, we will have the Gold Cup. And look, the Gold Cup we see every couple of years. And for the United States, they are one of the top two teams in that tournament, quite often reach the final. I do think the Olympics is something special. And because of the circumstance, because of the difference in competition and playing against European, South American teams from Asia, I would prioritize taking my guys, if available, to the Olympics for this summer. And that's because then you have the Gold Cup. It's a great problem to have, by the way, for Greg Berhalter. I know you're plugging and putting different players in different places, and each team might not be as strong as you'd like. But ultimately, if I'm a national team coach, you don't get that many opportunities with your players, and normally they're friendlies. So if you're saying to me, hey, you have a logjam of competitive games this summer, get guys in, get them opportunities, identify your top 40, rotate those through, and then ideally you come out of it in September, World Cup qualifying, and you have your best players playing, your A group, and away you go. And then from that point forward, it's, the lenses are focused in on all about the World Cup.
Look, this is about winning a World Cup ultimately from a men's perspective, okay? And the closest thing you are going to get to that is an Olympics, not a Gold Cup. I love the Gold Cup, and we're going to blow it out, and we're going to have a wonderful time, and it has wonderful moments and everything like that. But I would fall on, if I could have everybody that is available. And by the way, it's not just the players that we're seeing right now. It's all of those players that are age eligible, that are below 24, that could go and don't have to be one of the overage. So then you could have another 3 players that are actually overage. So it boggles the mind what the actual Olympic team could look like this summer. And it's going to change no matter what when they qualify. It's going to change, but who could go and who does go are two different things. And I would put it all in there. All right, let's turn it a little bit forward. And you mentioned the national team, the full national, because a lot of this is, using it as a platform to that full national team. We got the national team back. They are in action here. And by the way, just to button it up, USA versus Mexico happens. We were recording on Tuesday. This comes out on Wednesday. So it is happening today as you are listening to it. If you are listening to it on Wednesday, US-Mexico. And then on Sunday is that most important game, that semifinal game. We don't know who the US is going to face, but it is all or nothing. You win, and you go to the Olympics, and a lot of the stuff,
which I love. I love the pressure.
Yeah, it's awesome. These games that matter are great. The games that matter are so great, and we got a lot of them coming in 2021. So it's going to be fun. All right, let's turn it forward to games coming up against Jamaica and Northern Ireland. You can see the Northern Ireland one actually on March 28th on Big Fox. So we're going to be having that really, really interesting group of players. And once again, to your point, Stu, Greg Berhalter has not gotten a lot of time. All of this talent that we talk about, I don't know what Greg Berhalter's best 11 is, and I definitely think he doesn't know yet. He may have something in his mind, but until we actually see these players together, and it's hard, and it's going to be few and far between. So, for example, Musa that we talked about with the great news last week, we got to see him on the field. Chris Richards as a potential other center back to John Brooks going forward. A lot of people have him already in there. Well, we got to see him on the field. Gio Reyna, who is in and out of the lineup when it comes to Borussia Dortmund. A lot of people were talking to him more long-term in terms of 26, and then he started doing some really, really good things, and people are talking about him for 2022. Well, he's got to be on the field, and we got to see what that looks like. So a lot of interesting things when it comes to these couple of games here with a lot of these European players finally getting together. What are you looking for, Stu, and you looking for, Mosse, in these games coming up?
Mosse, you want to start us off here?
Well, I actually have a question for you two, because we did a segment a few days ago where you guys each picked your ideal U.S. starting lineup right now, and there were a couple of very interesting disagreements. I'll start at fullback. Stu, you had Reggie Cannon on the right and Serginho Dest on the left. Serginho Dest, who, by the way, scored 2 goals this past weekend for Barcelona against Real Sociedad, one of them assisted by Messi, so great moment for him. While Alexi had Serginho Dest on the right and Sam Vines on the left. And then the other disagreement that caught my attention was up top, where you had Josh Sargent, I believe, could have also gone Daryl Dike, who's doing incredibly well in Europe. Both those guys, Sargent and Dike, in good form right now. While Alexi is still kind of on this page that none of these young guys have fully convinced him. So he's still
on pumping the Josie train.
So yeah, I don't know where you guys want to start there, but both those really caught my attention. Where you guys?
God, I'd love to dig up old takes exposed when Lexi said that Bradley and Altidore, get them out, and I said keep them in. You need the experience. Here he is.
Then now we're at a different time. Times
2 years later, and he's like pumping the Altidore train. No way. Look, I think this roster is interesting, and we were talking about it, Alexi, a little bit about these games upcoming, and I said that this is really the last chance for free caps. And I say that like, okay, every cap is earned. I think every player that has played and represented the senior team, to think of what you've accomplished to get to that point, cherish it, enjoy it. But over the last couple of years, a number of players have been capped by the U.S. men's national team that in a normal cycle, had we qualified for the World Cup, would not be getting those opportunities. And it's because we've been experimenting. The experimenting phase is really starting to get to an end now. And you look at these 2 friendlies, the roster's getting narrowed down. It's largely European. I'm really interested to see Daryl Dike in the form that he is in right now for Barnsley. And boy, has he exploded onto the scene. College soccer at Virginia, great season for Orlando City, on loan at Barnsley, scoring goals left and right, and now being linked with Premier League teams. That's what you want. There's some competition now at the number 9 spot. And I would caution American soccer fans now of getting overly excited by any little moment that any American does in Europe, because, it's time to start focusing on when guys have genuine impacts and have genuine minutes, like guys like Serginho Dest, Mosse, like you said. And it's amazing that we've come from, I think 10 years ago with American soccer, when a guy scored in the Dutch second division, it's like all over social media, everybody's erupting on Yanks abroad. And now we're genuinely looking at a time when McKennie is scoring for Juventus, assisted by Ronaldo. Messi is assisting Serginho Dest. Gio Reyna is playing for Dortmund, and you have guys playing at the biggest clubs. It's an exciting time, but it's also a time where we still need to be realistic about how many minutes this team has played together, and that we haven't seen this team in really competitive matches where they mean something. And that's why I'm excited for 2021. And lastly, before I throw it to Alexi here on Serginho Dest, in an ideal world, I want Serginho Dest playing as a right wing back for the men's national team. That's his best position. But we do not have a good enough left back yet. Go back 20 years that you say that's our best left back, and a guy that I trust to play at the same type of level. I think Dest could play as a left back and Cannon could play as a right back without nullifying what could be a really good threat for us. And Sam Vines is not ready yet, Alexi. He's not ready. For me, in my eyes, to start a big qualifier for the men's national team. He's still developing. I would rather have Anthony Robinson in that position.
I wouldn't. But when I think about this, wait. So you're saying that someone like DK could possibly start for the national team, and I know I didn't hear you wrong. he's a collegiate player, someone from the college ranks.
He played college soccer in the ACC.
How is that possible? By the way, speaking of college, I watched Operation Varsity Blues. I know I didn't tell you at the top of the show what I watched, but you should check it out. It's a docudrama out there about the whole college admission scandal out there. But when we're talking about college is still going to be a path, and college athletics are still going to have a place to play when it's coming through. So look, if you have a world-class player, okay, and I think that Sergiño Dest is that, I want him playing in the position that makes him world-class. By the way, I think Canada's probably going to have the same problem or question when it comes to Alphonso Davies and where he is ultimately going to play for the Canadian national team relative to what he does and the world-classness that he has for Bayern Munich. But that's why I put him out there. The left back position, yes, it is a problem. And the reason why I have Josie Altidore out there is, to your point, nobody has stepped up. And I've said this before, until somebody does, and I hope that somebody does, whether it's DK or anybody else. I hope this year shows us that could happen. But if we had a World Cup qualifier tomorrow, I'm going to go with the players that I have a better idea of what they are going to do. And by the way, the left back position, there is nobody. And yes, you could do the flip like that, but like I said, I want that world class over there on the right hand side. But this is the good moment that we're in. There are so many different options and differing types of opinions because of the talent, and because now we have all of these different players, and it's all theoretical until we actually see them on the field. But it does foster this type of debate that we are having right now. Okay, those friendlies are, as we said, March 25th against Jamaica, and then Northern Ireland, March 28th. That Northern Ireland game is going to be on Fox. A lot of different players that we are going to see there. I know Mosse wants to add something before we move on to some other stuff.
Just want to sneak in one more question, Stu. Yunus Musa is in this U.S. squad. He is now committed to play for the United States, choosing the U.S. over England. Tomorrow in Olympic qualifying, the Mexico team will have a kid named Santiago Munoz, who was born in El Paso, Texas, who the U.S. is courting. The Mexico senior squad, which is playing friendlies against Wales and Costa Rica, has Efren Alvarez, who Greg Berhalter made clear the U.S. is still pursuing. Alexi and I talked recently about this whole business of dual nationals and how important an aspect of national team play it's become. And I even compared it to college football and college basketball recruiting. And Alexi, and I actually have some sympathy for this point of view. He finds something off-putting about a player having to be recruited to play for a national team. Do you see it that same way, or you don't have an issue with it? Or how do you feel about how much this has grown now and become such a part of this whole deal?
I get the grumbling from Alexi, and from a guy who is a dual national, was born in Scotland, moved to the United States at a young age. When the decision came, it wasn't a decision for me. I felt very, I was honored and excited and prideful to represent the United States while still being prideful of my heritage and being born in Scotland. And I've seen good and bad cases, and I've been on the national team during a time when a lot of dual nationals were coming in, and Jurgen Klinsmann was bringing in a lot of German Americans. And what I would say is it depends on the person, and it depends on the personality. It depends on your upbringing. And I recognize that in today's day and age, the United States is very diverse. We have a lot of Mexican Americans. We have a lot of German Americans. We have, America in itself. There's so many different types of nationalities. And that's why I don't want to just say, well, do we have to recruit you when maybe your mom was born in Mexico and your dad is born in America, and you grow up in a household that, is nationalistic towards both and feels that pride. So that's where I think I have some sympathy in that. And I also recognize that it is important to show some of these talents that the United States is welcoming to you. We want you to be a part of this project and selling it in a sense. And it's a reality. If you're not doing it, you're potentially going to lose some of these players. And I would say the narrative before, and you guys remember Jonathan Gonzalez, when the big uproar and we lost him to Mexico.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Does he have a cap for Mexico right now? It's not to say that he won't. And it's also just to show that in some cases we're going to get the player, in some cases we're not. And in some cases we're going to lose a player that will have no impact. And that player now, Jonathan Gonzalez, potentially thinking, oh man, where did this go wrong for me? Where would I be if I'd gone to the United States? And I'd be in this mix with potentially their most exciting generation yet. And That's right now something the United States really have going for them. And Tata Martino recognizes it. The Mexican Federation recognized it. I mean, they have essentially a group designated just to do this. And the U.S., I think, have done a really good job over the past year and a half with some big gets. Musa and Des being the two headliners there of two guys that will represent the American national team and have a really big impact for them.
All right. Well, anyway, we're going to be excited about these games. I'm excited. A lot of people are excited. Well, maybe we'll find something out after the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to have more definitive types of lineups and a better idea of at least who Greg Berhalter thinks he's going to use going forward. And these are all, like we always say, Tata Martino, he coined it. Champagne problems, right? Okay. And these are good things to have. These are good challenges for Berhalter and all of us as we go on. Okay. Before we finish up this segment and we let Stu go, I wanted to bring up something about David Beckham's Inter Miami, because that's basically the name of the team. Let's be honest. Okay. And it didn't start off great right now, but when you associate yourself with one of the biggest names, most famous people, biggest brands in the world, there is a level of expectation that they have yet to live up to in terms of what this Miami team was proposed to be relative to what it actually is at this point. David Beckham has, as we've talked about, become much more active in the situation right now. He's on the ground, he's at training, he's giving interviews, his face is everywhere, and he has basically taken it upon himself, and probably because it was a poor reflection on him and his brand, what happened so far. Firings, changes of the guard, and certainly not the elite level of team that we kind of expected from a David Beckham situation. He recently did an interview where he talked about the recruiting process and the big names that we associated, that we thought we were going to associate with the team. And he talked about how he doesn't think that it's going to be problematic going forward to attract big names to the Miami area and to ultimately his Inter Miami team. Stu, first off, I think the answer is no, but in your mind, do you think that Miami has lived up to what it promised? And more importantly, do you think going forward, there is going to be a change to live up to that?
No, they absolutely have not. I don't think you need me to tell you that as well. You recognize that. I think most fans recognize that. And quite frankly, they've barely put a foot right, if we're being honest. And this was a long courtship, and this was Beckham, picking different sites and where was it going to land. And we landed on Miami, and Miami was going to come into MLS, and boy, they were just going to blow it out of the water. I have some sympathy for Miami while simultaneously crushing them for a number of the things that they've gotten wrong on and off the field in their recruitment and the stadium disaster that they're having right now. The front office, a number of hires and fires they've had within a year. I mean, hired a coach in Diego Alonso and, barely giving the guy a fair shot during COVID, et cetera. And it's just saying, done, not what we want. I have sympathy in that, yes, it was COVID. It was 2020. It was a difficult year. You're trying to launch a team during a pandemic and create this buzz and this hype, and then you can't have fans in the stands. You can't even sell out your stadium in Fort Lauderdale. And I will give ownership credit in that they recognized that, and they've recognized the product on the field wasn't good enough, and they've attempted to make changes, albeit, look, in Major League Soccer, in the single entity structure, your hands are tied in many ways with regard to salary cap and what you can do and how much flexibility you have. So I think we're going to see that Miami in year 3. And I believe Beckham. Look, Miami is a booming town. It's on the up again. It's a tech hub. It's a beautiful place to live. The climate is great. It's attractive for European players. The money has to follow to bring those names. But if David Beckham's saying we can attract them, it leads me to believe that they're going to pay that type of money and bring those players in. Higuain didn't do it for me. Matuidi didn't do it for me. Pizarro hasn't quite lived up to the expectations just yet. So, they didn't get it right with their DPs. They didn't get it right from the middle of their squad. That roster was a disaster last year. I have hope, though, that this team will figure it out quicker than some other teams we have seen in Major League Soccer. And it is a priority, especially for Beckham, as you said, Alexi. It's a reflection on him, his brand, the Mosse brothers down in Miami who have a big brand and a name. And I think for them right now, this is a big embarrassment, and they want to make sure they get it right quickly.
All right. So, yeah. Well, maybe what they should do is sign Christian Pulisic. Because, I mean, he's not necessarily playing a lot, although we should mention that he did play this past week and not only played, but looked really, really good, even had a viral moment in terms of his dribbling. And that's good for the U.S. men's national team. But who knows going forward? I mean, if you're talking about big stars, now that would be something. If David Beckham's Inter Miami was able to lure Christian Pulisic back so,
I mean, you're taking it back to early MLS, luring back Landon Donovan or the early 2010 or 2011. Was it when Michael Bradley or 2013 when him and Dempsey came back?
Right.
That would be that's a hot take, Alexi, because if Pulisic came to Miami, could you imagine the reaction of a guy? The perception would be externally that he's mailing it in and he's coming back to MLS.
Right. But then you would have David Beckham and that global brand backing him and explaining, no, that's not the case at all. We're actually fundamentally changing the way that MLS operates and that this is the first person and the beginning of a movement towards the other way. I don't know. Mosse, what do you think?
Guys, why sign a star when you can develop one? I have two words for you. Edison
Ascona.
Here we go.
For those that don't know, Mosse,
finish it up, Mosse, because not everybody's going to know who you're talking about.
Edison Ascona is a 17-year-old who is representing the Dominican Republic in this CONCACAF Olympic qualifying tournament, and he has been the revelation so far. Stu, I don't know if you agree with me, but I've been thoroughly impressed by this kid.
Really impressed with him. I think he has a ton of ability. I'm not willing to remotely tout him in the same conversation as Pulisic or any of those guys yet, but if he has another good year of development with their Fort Lauderdale, I think you'll see this guy playing for their first team come maybe a year from now. But Mosse, I've been very impressed with him. A huge confidence and personality for a 17-year-old. It's actually one of the fun parts about this Olympic qualifying tournament that we're covering, Gold Cups included, Olympics, etc. You get to learn about guys in a shop window that you didn't know about before and see these guys express themselves. And he's taken that opportunity with both hands.
Well, you know who still is relatively young and always plays on the first team? That would be Stu Holden. Stu, thank you so much, buddy, for stopping by. As always, we will look forward to seeing and hearing you as this tournament continues. And then, listen, we got a big year, a big summer coming up, lots of soccer, and hopefully we're heading in the right direction to be able to see that soccer in the way that we know and some sort of normalcy with crowds getting back. But regardless, you are going to see and hear from Stuart Holden on all the different things that we do. You're always a pleasure to have here with all of your insight, and it's always a pleasure to work with you, my friend. All right.
Thank you, Lex. Merci, Mosse, because he's the French savant these days. And my last note is that Alexi, you and I were walking off the set yesterday, and I said I cannot wait to just feel that rumble and that energy from a live crowd. And I know we're trending back that way as hopefully we get to the end of a pandemic in 2021, but we have a lot of competitive soccer. We have a lot of pressure matches. This is the time to be a fan and to be covering the game. And hopefully after a really dark 2020, this is going to be a fun year, man.
Amen, my friend. Amen, my friend. I'll see you in the studio.
Merci, David. Au revoir.
Merci, au revoir.
All right, the great Stu Holden. We're going to take a real quick break here. When we come back, we'll take a trip around the rest of the world. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back. That was fun. It's always fun having Stu on the show and talking about all the things. He is young, well, certainly younger than I am, and he keeps us all young with his youthful exuberance. Mosse, where do you want to go first? We're going to take a little trip around the world here. There's all sorts of stuff going on.
Well, why don't we get the Champions League draw out of the way first, then okay. we'll shift to the international stuff. The draw occurred late last week. The quarterfinal matchups are Manchester City, Dortmund, Bayern Munich, PSG, Real Madrid, Liverpool, and Porto, Chelsea. And they actually already drew the semifinal matchups too, so we know who would face who. So the winner of Manchester City, Dortmund would face the winner of Bayern, PSG, much to Grant Wall's chagrin. And then the winner of Porto, Chelsea would face the winner of Real Madrid, Liverpool. So where do you want to go here? Big picture.
Well, I do. I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, you mentioned Grant Wall, and for those that don't know, Grant, made a point of saying that he was lamenting the fact that the way that these matchups have happened, we are going to get some very, very good teams playing against each other, and obviously one of them being knocked out at a stage when, at least according to Grant, he wouldn't, he would have done it differently. And look, this brought about debate from a lot of different people that agreed or disagreed, and then it took a whole nother direction out there. But it does ask the question right here. Look, these are some scrumptious types of matchups, no matter what. But, to his point, if you were organizing a tournament with these 8 teams in a single elimination or, home and away type of situation, you would probably do it differently to give yourself the best possible chance of the best teams ultimately meeting in the final. Do you appreciate and respect what Grant was saying in that sense?
No, I don't want to pile on, but I thoroughly disagreed with his his tweet. But the thing he had an issue with was that Manchester City and Bayern, who I think most people's estimation are the 2 best teams in Europe this season, have certainly emerged over the course of the season as that they would meet before the final. If they win their respective quarterfinal ties, they would meet in the semis. But first they have to win their quarterfinals. So in terms of Manchester City, Dortmund, in theory, first leg at the Etihad, second leg at Signal Iduna Park, but both these games might be in Budapest for all we know. I mean,
right.
We'll see. Interesting point of interest for me, obviously Erling Haaland, who's been linked with potentially a move to Manchester City, so everybody always is going to have their eye on him, but also Jaden Sancho. And you and I have talked endlessly about this on the pod. Jaden Sancho was an academy player at Manchester City, concerned about lack of playing time with the first team. So he moved to Dortmund and has blossomed into a big star there, while Phil Foden stuck it out. It took a while, but now he's blossoming into a big star. So it's going to be interesting to see them on the field against each other, Sancho and Foden, and everybody's going to compare and contrast the paths they each took. And Pep did comment on Sancho, said he has no regrets. He recognizes what a great player he is, but hey, he made his decision and he's happy for him. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that in this matchup.
All right, well, let's go through these if we have to pick them right now. You're taking City over Dortmund, right?
I would take City over Dortmund, yes.
Okay, and then Real Madrid, Liverpool. Is this a tricky one, or is it not so tricky?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I lean Liverpool, and I can't get that Chelsea Atletico Madrid tie out of my mind. This might just be a down year for La Liga and an up year for the Premier League, and sort of we don't quite notice it until they actually face each other head to head. And so I know Liverpool have their issues at the back. I know Keith Costigan is very concerned about how they're going to defend Karim Benzema, who is having a phenomenal season to the point where people are discussing whether Benzema needs to be in that Lewandowski-Haaland conversation of who the best center forwards are in Europe right now. And I agree. He's really carried that Real Madrid attack. Nobody around them is scoring any goals. We know Eden Hazard has been a disaster and is injured again. And so he's going to be no factor in this tie. And it's Real Madrid. They have the pedigree and all that, but I lean Liverpool.
Really? Okay. I'm going to lean Real Madrid. Okay. Then Porto, Chelsea. Who's the underdog in this?
Porto is the underdog. Chelsea made out great, and Chelsea have a little something going on right now. You mentioned Pulisic in the first segment. They are also through to the FA Cup semifinals. They'll play Manchester City in mid-April. They knocked off Sheffield United in the quarterfinals this past weekend. Pulisic started, had a great game, had that unbelievable Elastico-type play where he split 2 defenders that went viral. So they've even kind of got him going again with all the other players that have improved under Tuchel. And so they're solidly in the top 4. So Chelsea have a little something going on. That Lampard-Tuchel switch really ignited them. Reminds me a little bit of 2012 when they got rid of Villas-Boas and brought in Di Matteo and ended up winning the Champions League and the FA Cup that same season. The history could be repeating themselves here. I definitely pick them against Porto, and I think they would have a 50-50 chance against either Real Madrid or Liverpool in the semi. So we could be looking at Christian Pulisic and
really.
Chelsea.
Why are you so quick to pick them against Porto, and why do you consider Porto such an underdog?
Yeah, I guess I don't. I just sort of had this low opinion of Porto going into the knockout stage. And then the fact that they knocked out Juventus, and listen, credit to them, and Pepe's performance in that second leg was transcendent. But I kind of view that as Juventus screwing up more than Porto being better than I thought. Maybe it's unfair, but I haven't really recalibrated my opinion of Porto. I still view them as sort of.
How dare you? All right. I'm going Porto for sure now.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Alex Dowd, here's that.
But look, Tuchel, I mean, is worth whatever they're paying him and much more. What he has come in and, I mean, fundamentally changed the fortunes of that team. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And then that leaves the big one, which is Bayern
Munich PSG, right?
We should mention Real Madrid Liverpool is a rematch of the 2018 final. You remember Loris Karius had that shocker, and Real Madrid won 3-1. And then Bayern PSG is a rematch of last season's final, which Bayern won 1-0 and the bubble in Lisbon on a goal by Kingsley Coman. It's obviously a terrible draw for PSG. And I know nobody's ever going to feel sorry for them, but spare a thought for PSG for one moment. They were in a group with Manchester United and Leipzig. Then they face Barcelona in the round of 16, Bayern in the quarterfinals. If they get through that, probably Man City in the semis. And then if they get to the finals, still Real Madrid, Liverpool, or Chelsea. So if when the dust settles here, PSG won the Champions League, it will have been the most incredible path to get there. First,
do you think that either of these teams are better now than they were when they faced off in the Champions League final?
Well, it's funny. We just praised Tuchel, but I do think PSG, the Tuchel-Pochettino switch has done them some good as well. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, Tuchel just never really clicked there. I know he got to a final last season, but that was somewhat odd circumstances, that bubble. They got an easy draw. They played Atalanta and Leipzig to get there. I do think with Pochettino coaching them, they're a bit more solid. I know they were awful in the second leg, but that first leg performance against Barcelona really impressed me. Showed that Pochettino can put together a nice, compact, organized team there. The question is reintegrating Neymar to the mix. He came back this past weekend, came off the bench against Lyon. And again, with him, it's just not going to be enough time on the field. Now there's an international break. Then you come back. There's one more game against Lille and then the Bayern game. So Neymar, assuming he starts the first leg against Bayern, he'll step on the field that day having started one game in the last 2 months leading up to that game, essentially. And that's been my issue with Neymar. I know there are people that think, well, who cares about these Ligue 1 games? All you really need him for is a Champions League. But I think there's some value in him playing those games. So he's in a proper rhythm. He goes into the big Champions League games in sort of a natural flow of the season versus always coming back off these long injury layoffs. And so that really concerns me for PSG in this tie. But if Pochettino can sort of preserve that compactness that we saw in that first leg against Barcelona and reintegrate Neymar into that, then I think they have a real chance. I mean, they were very competitive in that final last season, and Bayern are not as good. They have some defensive vulnerabilities. So it's going to be very interesting, that tie.
All right. Who are you picking?
I'll pick PSG.
You will. All right.
It's been 3 years on this podcast. I might as well say something interesting.
All right, I'm going to pick Bayern Munich. So we differ on 3 different games. So I have Real Madrid as opposed to you having Liverpool. I have Porto, you have Chelsea. I have Bayern Munich, and you have PSG.
Now I reserve the right to change the week of these first legs. We'll really dig into them more. And
yeah.
Between now and then, there's an injury or something. I reserve the right to.
Of course. Don't worry. We're not going to hold you to it. All right, what do you want to move to?
Let me just get in. The Europa League draw also occurred. And boy, this is breaking nicely for Arsenal. Arsenal in the Europa League quarterfinals will get Slavia Prague, and then in the semis it would be the winner of Villarreal or Dinamo Zagreb. So I like Arsenal's chances a lot to get to a final. The other side of the draw is tougher. You've got Manchester United against Granada and then Roma Ajax, and the winners of those ties face each other in the semis. But we could be headed for an Arsenal Manchester United Europa League final here. That would be fun.
Listen, don't put it past Arsenal to screw up a good thing, okay?
Well, the other North London club is the one that really screwed up. I know there were people on Twitter that really wanted us to get into this. I mean, we kind of missed the window on it, but Tottenham getting knocked out by Dinamo Zagreb last week is just extraordinary because they are still in the top 4 mix for sure. But Mourinho, he wanted to keep this path open. He's a manager who, to his credit, sees the value in emphasizing the Europa League and that could end up being your better path to the Champions League. And so he put out strong lineups in the Europa League. He was definitely taking it seriously. And yet somehow they conspired to throw away a 2-0 first leg lead against Zagreb. And now they better finish in the top 4 or the season's a disaster.
There was nothing special about that performance. Okay. Where do you want to move to now?
It is an international break. And for me, the headline is that 2022 World Cup qualifying is beginning in both UEFA and CONCACAF. Lots of games, and so I'd love to dig into that if you're up for it.
Well, let's do it. What do we got here? And CONMEBOL is postponed, right?
Correct. There was that whole imbroglio involving the European players getting released, and the end result of that was they postponed the matches.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, in Europe, it's 55 countries fighting for 13 spots. The way it works is it's 10 groups. The 10 group winners qualify, and then they take the 10 second place finishers, and then 2 other teams from the Nations League, depending on their Nations League performance, which leaves you with 12. And they're going to set up 3 different little 4-team brackets. And out of that, you're going to get 3 more teams. And so combined with the group winners, that's how you end up with 13. And a few big picture thoughts here. First of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't start here. Zlatan is back for Sweden, 39 years of age. He had retired after Euro 2016. And now 20 years after his first call, by the way, his first cap was in 2001. Here he is back in the mix with Sweden. And he's talking up wanting to play in this next World Cup if they qualify. He'd be 41. I'm sure you, Rob Stone, and all the other Zlatan fans, very happy to see this, huh?
I am. I'm happy to see it, but I am really interested to see how the discussion went. I mean, it might have been just like, Zlatan, I want to play, and I'm going to play. But we know, having covered this team, how, what the long shadow that he casts, even when he's not even actually on the team. We saw it, with him making appearances at the World Cup. And, is this an act of desperation? Is this a act that just illustrates the incredible leverage and power that he has? Or is this really a fundamental decision that, despite all his baggage, despite all the problems, this is a guy that continues to be, regardless of his age and his injury and all that kind of stuff, the best that we have? And maybe that's an indictment on, the youth development that they have, but still it doesn't change the reality that this guy can lead you to a promised land that, is still very far off for a team like that.
And Sweden, by the way, in the same group as Spain, so it's going to be tough to win that group. Staying with the center forward theme, Erling Haaland, Norway, they're in the same group as the Netherlands. We've seen great players over the years that came from countries that don't have a whole lot of pedigree, and so they didn't get to shine at the international level. George Best being a famous example of that, George Weah with Liberia. I really hope Erling Haaland's career doesn't go that way. I hope Norway are able to develop enough players. Obviously, they have another great talent in Martin Odegaard, but they'll need more than that. And they're able to surround them with enough talent that they can qualify for these major tournaments. So their attempts to qualify for this next World Cup begin now. And boy, it'd be great to have Erling Haaland in Qatar in 2022. Huh?
It is a real kick in the when we have these incredible players that, just because of where they were born and who they represent, we don't get to see on that international stage, where we know, look, they're going to be legendary, I think, no matter what. And I'm not talking about that, but there is a special type of legend that comes from the international game. And having that either as, the primary place that you create your legend, or just adding and augmenting to a legend that you already have, it's good. And then you're right. It's sad when we don't see it. I mean, even Zlatan, part of the reason why I'm excited about this is to see him starring in a World Cup and doing something like that and adding to the already, amazing legend that he has. That's good. And so I don't, to your point, want to see some of these great players not get that opportunity.
England are in the same group as Poland, Robert Lewandowski, so those games will be fun. A couple more for you. Germany, it's a little bit of an odd dynamic. Jogi Löw has announced he's stepping down after the Euros this summer, but he begins this World Cup qualifying campaign still in charge, even though he is not going to manage at the World Cup. Their squad, still no Thomas Muller, Hummels, or Boateng. He did call Jamal Musiala. We talk about Yunus Musa. England lost another one of these dual national battles with Germany for Musiala. Do you think it's odd to be starting a World Cup qualifying campaign with a manager who's not going to be the guy later on during qualifying and also for the World Cup if you eventually get there?
Yes, I think it's odd, but the transition of power and the transitional planning that I think that the German Federation has done, there's an understanding. So I don't think it's going to derail Germany, but I do think it's a little odd. I mean, we've talked about it before over in Germany, where they sign coaches for a year out sometimes, and we've seen it happen. So it's not completely strange, but to us it is, and it would be a little strange for me.
And then last one before we shift to CONCACAF, I continue to be enamored with Portugal's squad. I know we got a long way to go, but I think Portugal has a real chance to win this next World Cup, which would be the crowning achievement in Ronaldo's
Really?
career. When you look at that squad, you see Ruben Diaz and João Cancelo and Bernardo Silva and Bruno Fernandes and João Felix and Cristiano Ronaldo and Diogo Jota. I mean, just talent up and down. So yeah, I'm going to have my eye on Portugal during this qualifying campaign to see if they're going to kind of live up to this, because I'm super high on them.
Well, what we have found out then is, while you reserve incredible praise and love and respect for the national team of Portugal, that does not necessarily mean that you like Porto. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's cool. All right. Well, anyway, good luck to England as they take on San Marino in a couple of days. Okay. We'll see if they can get past.
And they're going to squeeze 3 games during this break because they're sort of in catch-up mode too because of the pandemic.
More games, the better. I love games. I loved games. I hated training. I love playing games. The more games, the better. What else, Mosse?
And then shifting to CONCACAF, which remember, there's 35 teams. The top 5, which includes the U.S. and Mexico, go straight into the octagonal. They took the other 30, divided them into 6 groups of 5. You play teams in your group, and then the 6 group winners will come out of that. They'll play 2-legged ties against each other, and that'll leave 3 teams that will join the other 5 in the octagonal. So we now start that first round, which is those 6 groups of 5. And there are some big teams in there: Canada, Panama, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago. Haiti, by the way, let me spend a second on them. They had this craziness in their first Olympic qualifier where they arrived late, didn't get the proper COVID testing done in time. And so they had to start the match against Honduras with 10 players and no goalkeeper. And we all kind of looked at that and shook our head. And that's just Haiti being Haiti, and what a mess. And it sort of obscures the fact that Haiti has been on the rise lately. They had a fantastic run in the 2019 Gold Cup, got to the semifinals, beating Canada and Costa Rica along the way, lost to Mexico in extra time. In the semis. They also qualified for the 2019 Under-17 World Cup in Brazil. First time in a long time they've been in that competition. And actually, they've given a decent account of themselves in these Olympic qualifiers. Once they got that 11th player on the field against Honduras, they were very competitive. And then I thought they were quite good against Canada. They could have won that game. So keep an eye on Haiti, because it's not, if they can get out of each other's way. Jeff Hernandez texting me. I was going to get to that. There's just a crazy story involving their upcoming qualifier against Belize, where the Belize bus was stopped and there were some robbers that tried to, I haven't read this story carefully enough to really get into it. But again, that's what you have to, with Haiti, it's less about the players on the field. It's all this craziness that surrounds them in that country, unfortunately. And so,
well, that's, and that's, that's the shame. That's the shame of it, because there is quality. And, if you're Victor Montagliani, the head of CONCACAF, this is your daily struggle and fight, is to bring all of these teams up in terms of how they go about doing things. And, some of the stuff that is self-inflicted, the situation with not having enough players and all that kind of stuff. Mosse, I think our listeners would enjoy it, because you mentioned to me, you had actually read an article that lamented the fact of what Haitian soccer had turned into, what the federation had turned into. And in this moment, looking to the game and looking to this team and not being able to kind of wrap your arms around something that deserves to be and can be used to bring up people's spirits.
Yeah, it was a column in a Haitian newspaper called Le Nouveliste. And basically the guy talked about how Haiti is a country with so many problems. They've been hit hard by the pandemic, and soccer is what everybody there looks to for an escape. And I mentioned that great Gold Cup run in 2019 that really galvanized the nation. And so they were looking at this Olympic qualifying tournament as potentially being the same thing and being able to lift the spirits of the country. And then lo and behold, they have this, what the article referred to as an organizational debacle leading into their first game. And they end up having to take the field against Honduras with 10 men and a field player in goal. And so the article was just lamenting that they essentially let the whole country down, the people that the federation that were in charge of organizing for this tournament. And really, it was actually kind of sad. I read the article and I got a bit emotional because, for what you just mentioned, it's,
well, for teams like Canada and for Haiti that have to go through now this other process and this other backdoor to arrive at the octagonal, which the U.S. is automatically qualified for, it's a long process. But Canada is on the up. You look even at Buchanan, who we're watching play for the Canadian Olympic team right now, which is the real deal. I hope that someone like Canada makes it through this process and is able to step into that octagonal, because I think it would make it better.
I couldn't agree more. To me, that's been the best story in CONCACAF the last couple of years, the emergence of Canada. Now, we may not get to really see it this month because they've had a lot of issues getting players released. And also they had this COVID outbreak at Toronto FC. So that hurt their Olympic qualifying squad. It might affect the senior squad for these qualifiers. But just, on paper, you start thinking about the names. And you mentioned Buchanan. I mean, if they do play Davies as a winger, there's a world in which that front three is Davies, Jonathan David, and Tejan Buchanan. Or if they play Alphonso Davies as a fullback, then you have 2 fullbacks in Davies and Richie Larea. And, there's other players coming up like Jaden Nelson and Ralph Priso. You've got Baldissimo in that midfield. You've got, obviously, the older players like Mark Anthony Kaye. So yeah, Canada has the prospects are really good for the next few years for them. I'm excited to watch them.
And just a reminder, Canada has not qualified for the Men's World Cup since 1986. I actually remember watching Canada and being enamored with Canada, watching that 86 World Cup, because it was the closest thing as an American that I could come to having someone to cheer for, our friends to the north. And I would love nothing more, not at our expense, but I would love nothing more than to see Canada qualify for a World Cup for the first time since 1986. Mosse, what else?
No, so that's it for CONCACAF. I do want to sneak in one more international story. Did you see this Choupo-Moting situation with Cameroon?
No, lay it on me.
So Cameroon, they have 2 African Cup of Nations qualifiers coming up against Cape Verde and Rwanda. And Choupo-Moting, the Bayern Munich striker, was supposed to be in that squad for them, but they sent him an email and they asked him to confirm by a certain date that he would be available to play in those games. He didn't reply, so they took him off the squad. And then it was later revealed that they sent the email to the wrong address. We talk about some of these nations not having their act together. I'm sorry. I hate to make
you had one job. You had one job. I mean, can you imagine something like that? Oh my goodness. Before we leave this international part of it, the new FIFA World Rankings came out, Mosse. Look, I know rankings are rankings, but just to give you the top 10 right now, should we go 10 to 1 or 1 to 10? What do you think, Mosse? What's better?
Let's go. You want.
All right, let's go 10 to 1. All right, number 10, Italy. Number 9, oh come on, Mexico at number 9. All right, so Mexico is in the top 10. Uruguay at 8, Argentina at 7, Spain at 6, Portugal at 5, England at 4, Brazil at 3, France at 2, and Belgium at 1. And look, these are designed to foster debate, and there's the formula that people agree or disagree with ultimately. But, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the goal of the United States men's national team program to consistently be in the top 10. And it's certainly doable from a CONCACAF perspective. You need to look, the U.S. has done it in the past, but right now we're looking at Mexico showing up at number 9. And we'll see how, that top 10 and all the rankings are affected going forward with all of these games going on. All right, Mosse, anything else from around the world?
Do you want to sneak in the Xabi Alonso story? I know Jeff.
Yeah. Let's just touch on it right now because I think it is interesting. So let the people know what's going on with Xabi.
I'm sorry, I don't know if this is official yet, but it does look like Xabi Alonso is going to be the next coach at Gladbach. Marco Rose is leaving after the season to take over Dortmund. Point of interest in this country is that Jesse Marsch was mentioned as a possibility there, so Jesse does not get that job. Marco Rose was Jesse Marsch's predecessor at Salzburg. He parlayed success there into the Gladbach job, so everybody put 2 and 2 together and thought, well, Jesse's doing well there. Perhaps he could be Marco Rose's replacement, but instead it'll be Xabi Alonso. And yeah, we talk about this ex-player fetish. It always does seem to be these like cerebral central midfielders that people think is going to translate, whether it's Pep or Zidane or Pirlo or Xabi Alonso or Xavi, who's probably going to be a Barcelona coach soon, or Gerrard or Lampard. There's a certain type of Arteta that clubs are drawn to, and they think that type of playing career translates into being a very good coach. Now, in the case of Xabi Alonso, this is not a guy just sort of being handed something who hasn't worked for it. He played for Bayern Munich under Pep Guardiola, and supposedly even back then knew he was going to be a coach and really studied alongside Pep and tried to prepare himself for that. And since then, he coached Real Madrid at youth level. He's been the Real Sociedad B team coach the last couple of years. So there's a little something there. It's not like a Pirlo case where they just kind of handed him the job.
But there are still coaches out there and managers out there that are looking at this and rolling their eyes, and it's not going to change. I mean, it's amazing in this day and age of equity and equality and privilege and nepotism and all that kind of stuff. This has been going on for years. It will continue to go on because these hires, you think you're hedging your bets by saying, this guy was a good, and in this case, a great player, and that should translate in their ability. And we know more often than not, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, many, many good coaches have not necessarily been good players, which is why someone, like Zidane coming along, or even Pep for that matter, that were great players, their ability to translate that and to go in that world of coaching and have success hats off to them, because oftentimes it doesn't happen like that. But they are still going to get opportunities. You are still, because your name is Thierry Henry, going to be given opportunities that others of equal and many times even better qualifications are not going to get. Life isn't fair, and soccer isn't fair. And ultimately, whatever those opportunities are that you are given, you are then going to be judged on the team doing well or the team not doing well. You might even be given the benefit of the doubt going forward that other people wouldn't get in terms of going through a bad patch. When normally you would get fired, maybe they give you a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, which will be interesting to see. You mentioned Juventus earlier in the pod. If they continue on with Pirlo, or if they say this was a bridge too far and he needs to go back and do something different, and this was too much at the moment right now. All right, Mosse, that's good for around the world. Let's take another little quick break, and when we come back, we'll hit our Ask Alexi segment. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi. You send in some questions, comments, concerns, and we pick out a few each week, and we answer them, the ones that tickle our fancy. What do the people want to know this week, Mosse?
First up, What It Is asks, were you a smack talker out on the field or a no talk at all player?
So the act of smack talking, trash talking out there, I know is very prevalent in other sports. And I don't think that soccer is necessarily geared towards the ability to trash talk or smack talk. First off, it's outside in much greater spaces. There are obviously no timeouts or stoppages where a lot of that stuff can happen relative to other sports. I know there is stoppages, but you also have the international aspect of it, and so therefore oftentimes a language barrier. But yeah, there are those that would employ that as one of those skills. I was not one of them. I never saw, like I said, the benefit, and a lot of it ends up being F you, which is easy. But it's very fleeting. It has little to no effect on me or others, and it's so mundane and hackneyed that it doesn't do what I would want it to do. Even if I say it in a different language, at least if you're translating into a different language, some work and therefore some sort of intellect has been involved. I would always try to engage at different times if it was possible, to the extent that it is in soccer, and try to throw in non sequitur type of stuff and ask, have you read Ayn Rand? And see how that would happen, or ask them about music, or ask them about something, some current event that was going on, just in passing, and it was just to kind of throw them off for a second as they kind of twist and turn and that quizzical look appears across their face. But there was not a lot of trash talking per se, and certainly not in the way that you see in like a basketball or something like that, which I think just lends itself to the trash talking type of thing. Now, like I said, there were others that went out of their way and would prepare and find out about, personal stuff and would use it as they thought to their advantage. I also didn't want to give anybody fodder. I didn't want to give anybody something more than they had, which is another way of saying I needed all the help that I could possibly get. And if by doing something like that, inadvertently lit a fire under that person, then it would backfire on me, and that could be problematic. I don't know, Mosse, were you a trash talker when you were playing? If you were out there running around, do you say some things? Do you verbally spar with an opponent out there?
No, you've seen my lack of fitness. I was huffing and puffing that I didn't have the energy to say anything.
To be asked to form any type of words and syllables out there would be too much. I get it. Okay.
Next up, Brian Neal, I think it's pronounced. Why doesn't FIFA's rule of using under 23 men's teams at the Olympics apply to the women's teams as well?
Okay, so for those that have ever experienced or been to or watched men's soccer at an Olympics, it is traditionally and almost traditionally and historically a huge event. So much so that you actually, if an Olympics is in a certain city, for example, you always have satellite cities to accommodate the soccer, the football that is going on because of the size of the crowds and because of the popularity. And that is the case when going back to Olympics that were here in Los Angeles, even the Olympics that I played in, even though the Olympics were in Atlanta, quote unquote Atlanta, we were playing games in Birmingham, Alabama, and Washington, D.C. in 92. In Barcelona, we were playing games, satellites in all sorts of different cities. That's how big it is. And that's how popular it is. And that's how, let's be honest, how much money that it is that it is scheduled to make. And FIFA, their biggest cash cow and their prize asset and possession and property is the World Cup. And certainly the Men's World Cup relative to the amount of money that it generates relative to the Women's World Cup. And they wanted to protect against making the Olympics just another World Cup. And so there were concessions made. Originally, it was, unfortunately, from a FIFA perspective, becoming another World Cup. And so what they did is they made it under 23 at the time of the Olympics. And then, they said, well, listen, we kind of want to get some of those stars involved. And then they made it under 23. And then at the time of the Olympics, and then you could add 3 over-aged players to bring it in and kind of get some of that star power. And that's where it's kind of sat now for a while. Now, as the women's game has grown, and as the individual players continue to evolve, and the countries and cultures out there are putting more and more money into it, and we have seen the success and the popularity of the Women's World Cup and what it is and what it can be and what I think it's going to be going forward, there may be a time where they start looking at the Olympics and see it as a competitive type of event, and maybe in certain ways taking away from their prized possession, which would be the Women's World Cup. I don't think that they see that yet, and the numbers don't necessarily bear that out. But that's one of the reasons. But it would not surprise me in the least, as women's soccer continues to grow, if at some point they start to implement an age limit when it comes to it and becomes more of like a men's Olympic team, a more of a youth type of tournament that is used going forward. I just don't think that they worry now that it is biting into that cash cow that they have, that is the Men's World Cup. Mosse.
We'll end with a fun one.
Okay.
Oren Rowe, favorite quote, most Italian thing you did while you were out there?
So many, many years ago when I was playing over in Italy, you go to Italy, whether you're playing or not, you go there, and what are the first things you think of when it comes to Italy? Well, it's the food, right? And, I found lots of good food. What I found was the average food over there is really, really good. Okay. And yes, the really good Italian food is good, but you can find really, really good Italian food and really, really good food at a lot of places. But, that spectrum and the disparity between really, really good and really, really bad is much less over there. So I would go just to a local store or a local restaurant, and that wasn't necessarily expensive, wasn't necessarily popular, and the plates that I would get would be very, very good. And part of it, and we've had this conversation before, Mosse, is that I was eating it in Italy. Okay, I'm not gonna get into all of that. I immediately gravitated to some things that I never even liked. Spinach, which I never liked, and there's a lot of people out there that don't like spinach, but for some reason, the way that it was being prepared, it appealed to me. That was one of the things. Now, that's not necessarily an Italian type of thing. The pastas that I ate were very plain. They weren't extravagant, and they were very, very good. I remember when we went to Naples to play against Napoli, I remember players taking me out to find the buffalo mozzarella because of how great it was down there. And it was wonderful. Maybe it was because I was in Napoli. Limoncello, after a lemon cold, frosty type of, it's almost Slurpee-esque type of liqueur post-meal type of thing. I would definitely have some of that. Grappa, which is also a very strong after-dinner type of liqueur. I would have plenty of that. And there's all different, as there are dialects, there are all different versions of grappa depending on where you go. So those are definitely some of the things that I enjoyed when it came to the experience of being in Italy. A lot of it has to do with food in terms of typical Italian things that I did. And some of them are stereotypical, but some of them are very typical. And I partook in as many as I possibly could and enjoyed every single one. Mosse, anything come to mind when it comes to the typical Italian type of experience that you would think of?
No, it's funny. I've mentioned before that I'm watching this Stanley Tucci show, and I'm actually behind one episode. I have it recorded. I got to watch it. But I studied abroad in Florence, and I loved the food, with the exception of the bread. I found it so stale, the bread in Florence. And that always stuck with me. In fact, my parents then vacationed there years later, and they had the same reaction. We kind of wonder why, when everything else is so good, is the bread so bad? And in the episode Stanley Tucci did about Tuscany, he explained that. It was so interesting. He said they used to get their salt from Pisa, and then they had a big dispute with Pisa, and so they stopped getting their salt, and it became a source of pride. And so that's just the way the bread is made now. It's like just stale, but everybody's used to it. And so that's
well, listen, if you go to Italy and the worst part of the meal is the bread, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be just fine. You made it through. So yeah, I haven't watched that, but I know you had mentioned that. It'll be, it would be interesting to check that out. It was all very, very good. And as I said, you could just go to any normal place, not very popular and certainly not expensive, and recognize that your base level was very, very good quality, and for an affordable price. Anything else, Mosse, in the Ask Alexi segment?
That's it.
All right. Do use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there, or Ask Mosse for that matter, and or any of us, and send them through on all the different platforms that we have out there. And we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show with our one for the road. Okay, welcome back. It is the end of the show, and at the end of each and every show, we give you our one for the road. Some news came out actually this morning about a good friend in the soccer world, Ives Galarcep. You may have read him. If you have been involved in soccer for any length of time, you will know him, and you will love him, because he is incredibly interesting in the way that he talks about soccer. He works incredibly hard and has for a number of decades been a go-to type of voice when it comes to that. He is battling COVID, and he announced this morning that he is in the hospital. So all of those thoughts and prayers that we have from the soccer community and beyond going out to Ives Galarcep, and hope he hears this, and I hope he gets out of the hospital and recovers from this and continues to do the great work that he does when it comes to the soccer world out there. And it got me thinking about people that have been around soccer for a long time. I was doing a clubhouse chat the other day, and a young man, 20 years old, who's in college, got on and talked about how he was in college studying broadcast media in college, and that's what he was majoring on, and that's what he wanted to do. But it was all being done relative to the sport of soccer. And for a long time, the sport of soccer, when it comes to broadcast media and journalism out there, was either something that was ignored, or it was a stepping stone to the quote unquote big sports. And we're seeing a whole generation that has grown up, watching the likes of Ives Galarcep, or a Grant Wall, or a Joe Tutino out here in Los Angeles, and the list goes on and on and on. And even younger voices that have come about now, like a John Strong, who we work with. And once again, if I'm missing, I know I'm missing people, but that's just to say that there are now people out there that this younger generation has looked up to and emulated, and they aren't looking at soccer as a stepping stone. They are looking at it as a destination. And that is a change. That is a big change from when I was growing up. And as I want to say, it warms the cockles of my redheaded heart because of the fact that we have this generation now that has it in their sights to be involved in media, and to be involved in broadcasting, and be involved in journalism relative to the sport of soccer. And I hope we keep growing, and I hope there are more and more opportunities for them. And, you talk to John Strong, and he says, I'm living my dream. This is what I have wanted to do from a young age. And he's one of the very few in the world that actually get to do what they have dreamed about doing from a young age. And there are more and more men and women now that are growing up in an age where they can dream about being involved with soccer, and not necessarily kicking the soccer ball, but actually being involved in soccer and the industry that is journalism and broadcast and media and out there. And there are more and more opportunities. And as the sport continues to grow, there will be more and more opportunities. So I just wanted to use that and to throw back to Ives Galarcep, who is one of those originals. And there's certainly that came before, but he came of a time and saw the world expand, saw the soccer world grow. And, he has been and continues to be one of those voices out there that people can and should look up to and should learn from. And we, and he certainly have faced incredible challenges over the years. And yet their commitment to the sport is incredibly admirable. And I want to recognize him and so many others that have, paved the way for what has come later. And the fact that there is this 20-year-old kid in college right now that is looking to make it in the soccer world. And without people like Ives Galarcep, that doesn't happen, or it certainly doesn't happen as fast. So get well soon, Ives. We are all thinking about you. Mosse, anything before we go?
No, I send my well wishes as well to Ives for sure.
All right. We will be back again next week. Apologies for the 24-hour delay, but as Mosse mentioned right off the top, we continue to broadcast this incredible Olympic tournament. And Mosse, being the savant that he is and the incredible contributor that he is getting pulled in all different directions because he is so valuable. And so we couldn't get the pod recorded on a Monday, so we're recording this on a Tuesday, and it should be out there on the Wednesday. And as I mentioned before, U.S. Mexico, doesn't matter where, when, or how, it's U.S. Mexico. You just say it and you know exactly what we're talking about. Always fun to see the United States take on Mexico here in under 24 form right now to possibly win the group. So we'll see how that happens. And then, of course, on the weekend, the big game, the semifinal game for a chance to go to the Olympics for the first time since 2008 for the under 23 team on the men's side. Women's side, they've already qualified, but this Sunday, we'll find out who they're facing, and we'll find out if they can finally get over this hump and win that game and book their slot this summer in the Olympics in Tokyo. All right, we will see you again next week. And until then, as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.